psychoanalytical and client-centered therapy could not be more different from each other, but they really help to move us forward on the path. And the next big type of therapy we're going to talk about is behavioral therapy. So rather than being an insight, rather than focusing on the aha or eureka, behavioral therapy started off just focusing on behaviors and didn't regard your cognitions, didn't regard your feelings whatsoever. In fact, if you took Psych 200, you know about behaviorism, that's largely what this was. It was looking at conditioning and counter-conditioning. This is the idea if you have some sort of association, if you have an addiction or you have a phobia, it's been because you've been conditioned, like Pavlov's dogs drooling to the bell, for instance, and we have to uncondition that or counter-condition it. And what behavioral therapy really focuses on was looking at the rewards and punishments you receive in your life. If we want to get someone to get over a phobia, for instance, we're going to reward them for engaging in the thing that makes them scared. If we want someone to get over an addiction, we're going to punish them every time they do something they shouldn't be doing. And by using this reward and punishment, we'll change their behavior, we'll modify their behavior and change their outlook. And we can also do this to sensitize or desensitize them from the things that are scared or the things that they're addicted to. And so it's understood that for most of our life, we're set around these principles of escaping and avoiding. And because of that, we lead to phobias, or we lead to these outlets that are not healthy. And so behavioral therapy tries to get us to move away from that escape and avoidance into something more healthy. And so there's lots of different types of behavioral therapy. They don't tend to talk about our feelings though as much, but some of the more modern ones do. The first one we're going to talk about is adversion therapy. And so with aversions, what's going on here is we want to make someone pull away from something that they're currently addicted to or that they do too much. And so aversion therapy is the idea we're pairing your addiction with an unpleasant stimuli, what's often called an aversive stimuli. And so aversion therapy is the idea that we want to put this chemical in your beer that every time you drink it, you'll vomit or feel very nauseous, for instance. Or we want to make you smoke these certain types of cigarettes that will make you feel really gross and you won't enjoy them or find them pleasant at all. And so this can happen at a very biological level. It's almost like a biomedical treatment if it's making a nausea effect. But it also could be non-biological. It could be something like every time you do a bad habit, you have to put money in a swear jar, for instance. And so we know what happens here is if it's biological, it tends to be more effective, but we can also do it more socially and punitive, like putting money in a swear jar, or getting an electric shock, or having to say sorry, or having to do a silly chicken dance every time you do something. And it's the idea that eventually this will condition you out of the problematic behavior. There's also sometimes the use of contingency management in therapy. And this is the idea if somebody is in psychotherapy and that the therapist will only reward them when they do certain things. So only rewarding them when they make eye contact, for instance, or only rewarding them when they stop talking about their hallucinations. And so it's the idea that they only give them conditional attention. It's very different from what we were just talking about with client-centered therapy and unconditional positive regard. Contingency management is the idea that you only respond to the patient when they meet certain things. And sometimes with aversion therapy, it's not about really creating a strong aversion, but it's about going not cold turkey, but warm turkey. And so drawing someone out of their addiction. We talked about this a bit in the stress and health unit. And this is the idea we want to look at relapse prevention training. So relapse prevention training is the idea that if somebody has an addiction, but they can't just go cold turkey, or going cold turkey would be harmful to them, that we want to teach them how to track their behavior on a calendar, just make notes of how often they do it, practice certain coping strategies around it. What can they do instead of doing it? And plan ahead of time. If they know they're going to, let's say, drink or use cocaine, plan ahead of time. How much are they willing to do? What are the parameters around which they'll let themselves do that behavior? And that's really the first step in learning how to control the behavior. And so relapse prevention training can really help them to set up those frameworks. So aversion therapy is a key part of behavioral therapy. And the next one that we're going to talk about, though, tends to be more popular, and that is exposure therapy. So rather than trying to get away from something we're addicted to, this one we want to go towards something we're afraid of in most cases. And so what happens when we have a phobia or we're afraid is we often spend a lot of time in incubation. Incubation is the idea when you avoid the thing that makes you nervous or stressed out or fearful, this actually strengthens the condition. If you're afraid of elevators, every time you avoid an elevator or think about an elevator and then get away from it, it actually strengthens your phobia. And so what we want to do is weaken that phobia. And there's lots of different ways we can weaken the phobia. The most common type is through a systematic desensitization. So this allows us to desensitize our reflexes to our phobia. One of the very first things we'll do in this is, let's say somebody has a spider-related phobia. We will make an anxiety hierarchy or a phobia hierarchy, and we'll list all the different types of situations with spiders and rank how fearful they make us. Maybe watching a little cartoon spider doesn't make us too fearful. Maybe watching a movie with a realistic spider makes us pretty fearful. Maybe being in a room with a small spider on the other side makes us moderately fearful, but being closer makes us really fearful. Maybe the different types of spiders make us fearful. And so you would rank order all the different possibilities and all the different situations and how stressed out that makes you feel. Then when you have them in that order, you practice lots of relaxation therapy. You practice different ways to relax and calm yourself. And we talked about this a lot in our health and stress unit about muscle relaxation. And then you combine the two. You combine the two of the anxiety hierarchy and the relaxation therapy through extinction trials. With an extinction trial, you start at the bottom of the hierarchy, the things that are less triggering and less fearful to you, maybe a cartoon spider or a spider in a documentary, and you would have to watch that or be present with it for at least 15 minutes, ideally a half hour, and you would try to relax while that's present to you. So you're watching a movie about spiders and trying to relax. Then, once you're able to relax okay and you're desensitized to that, we would move up the scale. And then the next thing you have to do is try and relax when you are in, let's say, a museum and there's some spiders in a glass terrarium that cannot escape. And you have to just kind of watch them from a distance. And that could be very, very, very powerful. That could take you a long time to become desensitized to. But after so many trials and so many weeks of that, then we move up to where it gets even more intense. And that might be actually putting a very friendly, safe, non-poisonous spider in your hand, let's say. And then you have to practice holding the spider in your hand until you no longer get the reaction. Much like you would learn if we learn, much like what we know in behavioral psychology, is you can get lots of relapses, you can get spontaneous recovery, but eventually this can be very effective. We know phobias are extremely treatable. And you can make these anxiety hierarchies about everything. You could also make them about social phobias. You can make them about driving phobias or fear of heights. And what can really help with these systematic desensitizations is if you pair the adversive stimuli with what we call an appetitive stimuli. It doesn't have to be something you're going to eat, but we pair a reward with a punishment, or pair something you like with something you dislike. And so we often find, especially with kids, if they're trying to get over their fear, putting a piece of chocolate in their mouth can really help, because that calms the system, makes the system more happy, and can compete with the more fearful thing. Of course, you have to do this under supervision of a professional, because you could make it go the wrong way, and you could make us afraid of chocolate if you're pairing it with spiders. Now, another approach, aside from systematic desensitization, a little bit more controversial, is flooding. Flooding should only be done under extremely close supervision. And what this is instead of making the anxiety hierarchy and doing all these extinction trials, we just absolutely stick someone in a really distressing but safe scenario until they get over their fear. With the systematic desensitization, it's important to acknowledge that in extinction trials, there's never any real danger. You're never in danger of touching something with poison. You're never in danger of actually being harmed. You're never in danger of a car crash or falling or drowning. And we're just trying to get over the illusion of fear, not real danger. It's healthy to be fearful of real danger. And so with extinction trials, we're always making sure that there's no possibility for things to get worse or to get more harmful. With flooding, we also have to take that very crucial step. And so what flooding could look like is the idea that you find a species of very safe, very friendly spider, and instead of doing all the steps, you just go right to the end, where now you have to hold the spider in your hand until you calm down. This can be really distressing, and not everybody is ready for that all at once. You can also do the thing where you crawl into the box of snakes, or if you're afraid of heights, you just go up to the tallest tower in your city until you get over it. And so sometimes it's called flooding because you're literally flooded with that stimuli that is so overwhelming to you, until eventually your heart rate slows and you become desensitized to it. So exposure therapy can really help us to get over something that we've been trying to avoid. We can also use behavioral therapy not for addictions or for avoidance, but also just to start new habits. And so we can see this a lot used in applied behavioral analysis. Applied behavioral analysis can be used particularly with kids on the autism spectrum, but with other populations as well. And applied behavioral analysis is the idea of really persistent rewards and punishments. More often rewards than punishments. They tend to work better in the brain. And this is the idea that every single thing you do, whether it's just sitting or making eye contact or getting things ready on your desk or moving a pencil, you get rewarded for until that becomes a habit. And so the work of applied behavioral analysts is extremely grueling, extremely tedious, especially when they're working with young kids, and they're just teaching them very, very basic skills that can take a long point in time to grasp. But every time they do it and do it successfully, they get rewarded for it. And this will eventually shape their behaviors. We can see this used especially in token economies. So token economies is when, no matter who you're working with, if it's a kid, an adult, or what population, you give them a reward for doing some sort of new behavior. This could be the idea you have a chore chart, and every time a child cleans the room, they get a star sticker on that day on the calendar. And then after so many stars, they can trade that in for a toy or an allowance. This is the idea that by doing chores, they might get a cookie, for instance. Now cookies could be the reward. Cookies could also be the behavior rewarding. We see token economies used to help treat things like eating disorders. This is the idea if somebody actually eats the cookie or eats the apple, we let them get something they want as a reward. Maybe we give them some shopping money or something of that nature. And so token economies could be the behavior that you want, could be the reward, or maybe we're trying to get them to stop eating cookies and start to eat the apple. There could be all kinds of things. In these token economies, we see these used particularly in social skills training. Some social skills training we need to do is teach people how to communicate assertively. A lot of people will avoid assertiveness because it feels uncomfortable to them, or making eye contact, conflict resolution, or teaching them certain coping strategies that are outside their comfort zone originally. So these little rewards or sticker charts or some sort of badge system can help us to get there. So behavioral therapy, aside from our anxiety hierarchy that we're talking about in exposure therapy, behaviorism and behavioral therapy is largely not about our feelings or our thoughts. It's about shaping our behaviors and not really doing a lot of talking, not really doing a discussing of our feelings or our memories or our motivations. Where we're going to go to next takes a combination of both insight and behavioral therapy and leads us to some of the most common types of psychotherapy that we have in Canada today.